On date of ruling, the International Court of Justice delivered a landmark ruling against Israel's occupation of Palestinian territories. This decision holds immense significance for international law and justice for the Palestinian people. The court found Israel in violation of numerous international laws. It called for Israel to cease its illegal actions. The ruling demanded reparations for the harm inflicted upon Palestinians. This judgment has the potential to reshape the geopolitical landscape. It has ignited hope for a future where Palestinian rights are recognized. The ICJ's ruling is legally binding on Israel. It carries significant moral weight within the international community. The court examined decades of Israeli policies and practices. It concluded they constitute a grave breach of international law. This judgment serves as a powerful indictment of Israel's occupation. It exposes the illegality and injustice inherent in the system Israel has imposed. The ruling's impact extends far beyond the courtroom. It could compel Israel to end its occupation and recognize Palestinian self-determination. The ICJ's findings are rooted in well-established principles of international law. These include the inadmissibility of acquiring territory by force and the right to self-determination. The court also invoked the Fourth Geneva Convention. This convention prohibits an occupying power from transferring its own civilian population into occupied territory. The court's ruling leaves no doubt about the illegality of Israel's actions. It affirms the Palestinian people's right to freedom and self-determination. This landmark decision has sent shockwaves through the international community. It has been met with praise from human rights organizations in many states. However, Israel has rejected the ruling. It has accused the ICJ of bias. This reaction underscores the challenges ahead in enforcing the court's decision. Nonetheless, the ruling represents a significant victory for the Palestinian people. It provides a powerful legal and moral basis for holding Israel accountable for its actions. The ICJ condemned Israel's policy of forcibly evicting Palestinians from their homes. It also condemned the demolition of Palestinian homes and properties. The court recognized these actions as blatant violations of international law. These practices cause immense suffering and displacement. They are central to Israel's strategy of controlling land and resources. The ICJ's ruling sends a clear message. It states that these actions are not only morally reprehensible, but also illegal. The court meticulously documented countless instances of forced evictions. It also documented home demolitions carried out by Israeli authorities. It found these actions to be systematic and widespread.
These practices often target vulnerable communities. They leave families homeless and without recourse. The court recognized the devastating impact of these policies. They cause psychological trauma and disrupt social fabric. The ICJ's condemnation of these practices is unequivocal.
The court's ruling emphasized that forcible evictions violate the Fourth Geneva Convention. This convention explicitly prohibits an occupying power from forcibly transferring protected persons from their homes. Israel's justifications for these actions, often citing security concerns, were deemed insufficient. The court found no justification for the deliberate infliction of suffering on a civilian population. The ICJ's findings on forcible evictions and home demolitions are a testament to the plight of the Palestinian people. They highlight the urgent need for international intervention. The court's ruling serves as a powerful reminder. It reminds us that the international community has a legal and moral obligation to protect civilians during armed conflict. It is imperative that concrete steps be taken to hold Israel accountable for these violations. We must ensure that Palestinian families are no longer subjected to the trauma of displacement and dispossession. The ICJ directly addressed the issue of Israeli settlements in the occupied Palestinian territories. It declared them a flagrant violation of international law. The court recognized these settlements as a key element of Israel's settler colonial project. This project aims to solidify control over Palestinian land and resources.
The ruling dismantles Israel's legal justifications for these settlements. It reaffirms the illegality of transferring its civilian population into occupied territory. The court's ruling highlighted the systematic nature of Israel's settlement enterprise. It detailed how, for decades, successive Israeli governments have encouraged and facilitated the transfer of its citizens into the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem. This policy, the court found, directly contravenes Article 49 of the Fourth Geneva Convention. This article explicitly prohibits an occupying power from transferring parts of its own civilian population into the territory it occupies. The ICJ rejected Israel's claims that these settlements are a matter of domestic policy. It emphasized that the establishment of settlements in occupied territory constitutes a breach of international law. This breach is not only illegal, but also significantly impedes the realization of a two-state solution.
The court's ruling underscores the illegitimacy of these settlements. It calls for their dismantlement as a prerequisite for a just and lasting peace. The ICJ's condemnation of Israeli settlements is a significant development in international law. It reaffirms the applicability of the Fourth Geneva Convention to the occupied Palestinian territories. This ruling sends a clear message to Israel. It states that its settler colonial project is illegal and must end. The international community now has a legal and moral imperative to act decisively. It must hold Israel accountable for its violations. It must ensure the dismantling of these settlements. This is crucial for achieving a just and sustainable peace in the region. Section 4. A climate of impunity, settler violence, and Israel's failure to protect. The ICJ expressed deep concern over the persistent violence perpetrated by Israeli settlers against Palestinians in the occupied territories. The court found Israel in violation of its obligations under international law. Israel has failed to protect the Palestinian population under its control. This failure has created a climate of impunity for settlers. It has emboldened them to commit acts of violence and intimidation against Palestinians.
The court documented numerous instances of settler violence. These include physical assaults, property damage, and destruction of crops. It recognized the devastating impact of this violence on Palestinian lives and livelihoods. The ICJ also criticized the inadequate response of Israeli authorities to these acts. It highlighted a pattern of impunity for settlers who commit crimes against Palestinians.
The ruling emphasized that Israel, as the occupying power, has a legal obligation to ensure the safety and security of the Palestinian population under its control. This obligation includes protecting Palestinians from violence perpetrated by Israeli settlers. The court's findings demonstrate a clear failure by Israel to fulfill this obligation. This failure has fostered a climate of fear and insecurity for Palestinians living in the occupied territories. The ICJ's condemnation of settler violence and Israel's failure to protect Palestinians is a crucial step towards accountability. It sheds light on a deeply troubling aspect of the occupation. This aspect is often overlooked or ignored.
The court's ruling sends a clear message. It states that Israel cannot continue to abdicate its responsibility to protect all civilians under its control. The international community must now take concrete steps to ensure Israel's compliance with international law. It must hold perpetrators of violence accountable. It must create a safe and secure environment for all.
Section 5. Deprivation and exploitation Palestinian access to natural resources. The ICJ addressed the critical issue of Palestinian access to natural resources in the occupied territories. The court found Israel in violation of international law. Israel has imposed severe restrictions on Palestinian access to water, land, and other essential resources. These restrictions have had a devastating impact on the Palestinian economy and the daily lives of millions. The ruling underscores the illegality of an occupying power exploiting the resources of the occupied territory for its own benefit.
The court meticulously documented Israel's discriminatory policies regarding water allocation. These policies heavily favor Israeli settlements while depriving Palestinians of their fair share. The ICJ also condemned Israel's control over Palestinian land and its exploitation for the benefit of settlements and Israeli industries. These actions, the court found, constitute a blatant violation of international law. They contravene Article 55 of the Hague Regulations. This article prohibits an occupying power from using the resources of the occupied territory for its own gain.
The ICJ's ruling emphasized the detrimental impact of these policies on the Palestinian people. It highlighted how restrictions on access to water and land have crippled Palestinian agriculture. They have hindered economic development. They have exacerbated poverty and humanitarian needs. The court's findings expose the systemic discrimination inherent in Israel's occupation. They demonstrate how this discrimination deprives Palestinians of their fundamental right to development and self-sufficiency.
The ICJ's condemnation of Israel's restrictions on Palestinian access to natural resources is a significant victory for international law and justice. It reaffirms the principle that an occupying power has a duty to administer occupied territory for the benefit of the local population. The international community must now take concrete steps to ensure Israel's compliance with this obligation. It must pressure Israel to dismantle its discriminatory policies. It must guarantee Palestinians equitable access to their natural resources. This is essential for achieving a just and sustainable solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.